my peoples, what's up? Welcome to Shelf Stories, the channel that tells tales from games, books, and life. I'm your host, Jason. Thank you so much for stopping by for this latest episode where I'm going to give a flag for people. Sometimes I'll do, gaming stuff, straight up gaming, what's fun that's going on the table. Sometimes I take a left turn. This is going to be a left turn conversation where we talk about kind of the meta of gaming, cultural stuff with gaming. So if that's not your bag, then you got plenty of other stuff. I always talking games and having a good time. But as anybody knows me, I very much value the health of our community. I'm in the Discords, I'm in the online conversations, and I want us to have better conversations. I want us to get together, and I have a perspective, and people who know me know my perspective. So I'm going to continue to have guests who are also care deeply, and this is why I reached out to this man. So this man comes to us from the RPG world, but we are talking about gaming communities, which is very much overlapping, which is why I invited this man onto the show. He is an occasional host over at Asians Represent podcast. He is DM Steve. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. No, I'm really excited to be here. And like you're saying, communities are really, really important, and I'm happy to talk to it, my experiences, where I think there are gaps in the overall kind of space and where I think people are really killing it.
Yeah, I mean, so let's get familiar. This is going to be a bit of a crossover with the D&D RPG and the board gaming world, but we need to get to know each other because those folks who we're talking about that cause the problems, they also cross over as well. So we're getting to know our communities. But let us know about you, my friend. So I know you from the podcast, and it's an excellent podcast, the Age Represent podcast. One of the most recent ones was on cultural consulting, which made my heart happy because as a cultural consultant. But tell us about yourself and your activities and how you fold into that project.
Yeah, absolutely. So my real name is Steve Wen. I'm a RPG writer, consultant, and creator based out of Toronto, Canada. So my recent project was actually the Unbreakable anthology. I wrote and edited for Unbreakable Volume 1, which is a D&D anthology, D&D 5e, all one-shot adventures written and illustrated by a fully Asian cast. Mm-hmm. That was really great to work with the team and editors and things like that. I learned a lot. It was my first writing credit, which was great. And then I've now moved into editing and cultural consulting as well. But my main focus really is on the Age Represent podcast, where I jump in pretty frequently now just to speak and work through a lot of these ideas of age representation and overall representation. You mentioned the cultural consulting. That was a brilliant episode. I was really happy with that. The latest episode, the last of the season, was on Black and Asian communities, working together and building each other up, as well as the gaps that have existed historically between our communities and how we, as individual people who really care about communities, like we're talking about, approach that. And, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. But with effort, there's a tit for tat situation where the more you put in, the more you get out of it, which I think is very lovely. If not necessarily the easiest solution, but hey, I'm not here for easy solutions. I'm here for good ones.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and that's exactly what this show is all about. We're not here to take the easy route. I think you get a lot of energy from folks, or I get a lot of energy from folks where it's like, if I want to make things better, then just stop talking about it. Right. Stop bringing it up so much. And, we can just be there. Why are you bringing it into the games, or why are you bringing it into communities? That's what's causing the problem, is the people that are constantly, quote unquote, constantly talking about it. And, for various reasons. And it's such a hard thing to explain, depending on the mindset of the person, everything. We'll get into all that. But we're going to set the table there. And now we're going to have a little bit of the main course now. So the reason I reached out to my friend Steve, he put up a Twitter thread about an experience that he had with Discord. Discord being, I don't know, it's kind of I don't know if it's underrated space in terms of, gamers getting together. Like, I think in our spaces, we're used to the Facebooks and everything. But I think individual creators and companies, they have their Discords and people hop on, and a lot of the gaming conversation is happening over there. So WotC, Wizard of the Coast, had a Discord, or has it? I think they still have the Discord, right?
They still do.
And so actually, I'll let you carry the story from there, because you had an initiative that wanted to kind of address some things that were happening. So let us know just at the very beginning your approach.
Yeah. And I'll definitely say that I think, adding on to that before I jump into it, I think Discord is kind of the future of community building, you can see, and I'm sure you've felt this, you kind of start with like the Google Spaces and Facebook groups and things like that. The Google Spaces, sorry, Google Plus, Google Plus,
Right.
that kind of petered out and is now sunset. Facebook groups are still pretty popular. But if you look at who's left of Facebook groups, it's very strange. It's a very nebulous place to navigate. Discords allow, I think, now a much more energetic community to vibe, no, to grow and feel each other out, and then they splinter off very easily.
Right.
Unlike a Facebook group where it was a little bit cumbersome, whereas Discord allows you to just, there you are, you have a community now, figure it out. And I think in a lot of ways, Wizards of the Coast knew from a marketing standpoint that Discord was kind of like the new wave. So the D&D official Discord is an open Discord. They have like the SEO, like you can just type into your browser discord.gg/DND. That's Delta Nancy Delta. And you just get there, and it's open, it's public. And all you have to do is like click a button to say, I accept the terms of agreement, and you're in. So it's like really accessible. And that was kind of rad, to be honest. Because, in the tabletop RPG space, we always talk about inclusivity and accessibility. And as far as accessibility, this Discord's really accessible. So you click a button and boom, you're in a community, 100,000 people.
Right. With channels up and down and different conversations buzzing around.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, with that many people, people are talking about whatever they want to talk about. And when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons, people are talking about builds. They're like, I want to build a paladin. Here's how you build a paladin. Here, I want to build a cleric. What spells do I take? That kind of stuff. And like, that's like 90% of it. But every once in a while, you get someone who's like, I don't know how much I want to say, and I don't want to trigger necessarily your audience here. So I guess like I'll throw in like content warnings for like really blatant racism, queerphobia, transphobia.
This is Good Trouble. So we got Good Trouble is like explicit warning space. So like if we need to get into this stuff, and that was actually one of my questions. I wanted to get specific because I think there is a tendency to minimize some of the things that are said and done. So we need to see it. We need to talk about it. Like, what we deal with here in the multicultural space.
So with that in mind, I'll say my piece and then I'll throw my content warnings and then I'll get into the details here. But I mean, when you have a space that's 90% just like, shoot the shit, and you don't have really good moderation, the other 10% kind of begins to feed into some really bigoted talking points. Right. So I'm sitting in this Discord and I see people say things and I'm like, that is word for word what I've seen, white supremacists say. And this is word for word what I see TERFs say. And I'm looking to moderators and I'm like, can you do something? And I will report it. Like 100% I'll report it, as although I don't think that's what my job should be. I do report it. And maybe I see action, maybe I don't see action, maybe I agree with the action, maybe I don't. But the fact of the matter is, when I go into the space, it's like being in any other public space as a person of color who's queer. I look at it and I'm like, I can't fully be here. I can't 100% be present in this space. I have to be only 90% here. The other 10% is for my own safety.
Right.
And from here, I'll get into the details. So again, content warning for some pretty explicit racism, bigotry, queerphobia, and some transphobia here. If this is where you need to peace out, thank you so much.
Yeah. No, this is Good Trouble. Like, this is what people sign up for when they press that link. Good Trouble episode from Jason. Here it comes.
So, I noticed a pattern of people kind of asking questions that really began to sidle along the ideas of racism in Dungeons and Dragons. And when I say racism, what I really mean is systemic racism. Though I don't use that term because I think academically, most people who care about these topics understand that when I say racism, I really mean systems of oppression. So that's one hurdle right off the bat. I'm like, I'm going to speak to the academics. I'm going to use their language and their verbiage, and I'm not going to define things for you because that's not my job.
Right. I think, so I would use one definition. I've talked about this many times, but people, it's not getting, like, what is racism, right? I mean, I think when we say racism, the idea is that we're accusing a person of hating another person. You hate somebody else for the color of skin, and okay, that's maybe 3% of the actual racism that goes on. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that happens. So it's like, it's more along the lines of just like the comments, the judgments, people just kind of say things and they think it's a joke. but it's actually very impactful. Let's focus on the impact. Like if you say something, no matter what, you may not say it hatefully, you may not say it, you may just have to be out of ignorance or bias or whatever it is, but the impact is like, ooh, okay, no, I don't feel welcome here now because someone is in an Asian case would be like, I don't know, saying stupid things about like facial features and everything else, and with Latinos, we have our own stuff. So it doesn't have to be intentional. We're not accusing anybody of hating. However, racist stuff gets said.
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't even realize what that is, and then a blow up happens. Like, what happened? Well, a racist thing was said. Sorry about that.
No, I'm like, let's get into that.
Yeah.
I think I talk a lot about Asian communities and Black communities having like overlap, and how some of the trauma we experience, we can speak to it. It's not the same, but like the Venn diagram is, pretty, it's there. And, I think for the Latino community and the Asian community, and let me know if this is your experience, is that Asian men and Latino men are mass presenting folks, we're seen as like violent. We're seen as like at any moment in time, we could just like begin to fight. And that's really harmful, because what that means is that, depending on how you present, I might actually look like a threat to a white person, especially a white man. And, it's really hard for me to go to bars, for example. Like I love going to bars. I love going and like talking to people. I love meeting new people. But if I go to a bar that's predominantly white, especially if it has like a biker aesthetic and things like that, that's actually bad news bears for me. That's kind of a flag for me, because what I have to watch out for is someone who's just looking to pick a fight. Because if you pick a fight with someone who's a person of color, depending on how it is, you kind of always win if you're white. And what I mean by that is that if you beat them in a fight, you injure them, you hurt them, then you're like, I beat the expert. I became the white savior. But if you lose to them, then you get to call the cops and you get to put them in jail for a very, very long time and ruin their life. And then you win, because even though you lost, you get to say, well, they pulled out something that I wasn't expecting. They pulled out Asian Kung Fu. They pulled out some Latino rage, wild shit like that. And I'm just
were drunk.
Like,
they were drunk, and they were like, that's the kind of stereotype that happens.
They took advantage of me. Yeah. Like, and that's what I mean by systemic oppression. The system, the law system, enforces this idea, because if you're a person of color, Asian, Black, Latino, especially, and you're a man, the law will judge you harsher. If I go to court for a bar fight, I'm going to be judged actually more harshly than white people. And that is, you can look at the statistics, and that's the way it is. And that's really scary.
Yeah. And it happens just not even, you don't even have to get as far as the court. Like you can get to just, pullovers. We don't have to talk about like the driving instances and everything. I guess in the gaming space, what happens is, especially in these kind of like when you get into a gaming Discord, it's going to be guys, right? It's going to be a lot of guys. But what you were mentioning before about like, okay, someone being threatening, like it's almost like we can barely say anything. And it's interpreted as a threat, right? I mean, if we say something, the interpretive field kind of kicks in, and the thing that we said was like, well, hey, I'd like to ask a question about this. Why are you attacking this thing? Why are you making it? It's like, I didn't say that. I didn't attack anything. And there's a lot that goes into it, but a part of it is what you're saying. It's like this, I don't even know what to call it, a distrust or a judgment or something like that like we are being aggressive and we want to pick a fight. I've been accused of that multiple times. Like, I do what I do, the good trouble, to pick fights.
Yeah, bro, it's racism.
Like, yeah, I mean, that's how it goes back to it.
That's what we're talking to. That's the definition, right? That's a symptom of the definition where we talk about symptoms of oppression.
Right.
That said, back to the Dungeons & Dragons Discord.
Right.
So it's a big old server, 100,000 people. My human brain cannot fathom that many people sitting in a room, but here we are. Digitally, we can do that. There's a moderation system. And the moderation for the WotC Wizards of the Coast Discord is outsourced to something called Mod Squad. You can look them up online. Mod Squad is a public service, or not public service, I'm sorry. It's a paid service. It's a private company. And you bring in their moderators, and based on your tiered pricing, they moderate your space. I don't know the details, but I do think from other conversations with community managers and whatnot that you can kind of give them guidelines and they try their best to work within those guidelines. However, at the end of the day, it's human beings who are given these like white sheets and they do their best.
Right.
So in this Discord, a lot of times these racist comments come up, and it's not bigoted per se. They're not saying that I want to do these things to like this very specific real life ethnic group. No one's saying I love Oriental adventures because I think Asians suck.
Right.
Like no one says that. That's ridiculous. But what you do see are things like, hey, I'm thinking of playing a game where my players will go to a Southeast Asian inspired country. And their job is to civilize the people, and there will be resistance. And I'm like, hey, that's straight up bigotry. Like what you've described there is a power fantasy for white supremacists. If there's no nuance in that, you are absolutely playing into that. And I have to be really careful, because if I say too much, the mod squad, not lacking all context, because of course, as a third party, they don't have full context there. They will look at that. And if I'm too harsh on that critique, they can actually ping me ban me, mute me for being not civil or respectful. So I have to do actually like 10x labor and just like to bring that to light. And then we can have a back and forth. You know, right. I'm putting in 10x the work, they're putting in 1x the work, and they're defending their colonialist storyline that's going to basically perpetuate the idea that colonizing a country is actually beneficial. And they're going to play power fantasies about, you know, taking down rebellions. And I'm like, this is disgusting. I have a disgust response to it, and here's why, blah, blah, blah. So that happens. It took me 2 years to get to level 20 in the Discord. It's about 7,000 messages. So in about 2 years, I sent 7,000 messages. That allowed me the ability to create threads, which is a new Discord feature, which allows me to create channels within channels. So I took the D&D general channel and I said, hi, everyone. My name's Steve. I've noticed that we've had a lot of conversations about race, bioessentialism, and other essentialisms within the sphere of Dungeons and Dragons. I'm going to create this one specific space where we can begin to have these conversations. We can deconstruct them. In this space, we're going to highlight BIMPOC voices, BIMPOC, Black, Indigenous, Mixed, Person of Color voices. If you're white, your voice is still welcome, but we're going to prioritize these voices. And I just like started that. And what I ended up doing was doing a lot of work trying to facilitate conversations, trying to ask very specific academic questions to help people, you know, begin to deconstruct and begin that process and whatnot. And that thread went on for, I'm going to say 4 months ish.
Wow.
And, you know, after that time, I had a lot of data. I had a lot of messages I could read through. In fact, if you want to go to the D&D official Discord, it's still there. It's archived, but archives are viewable. You can just click on threads, look at archive threads, and you can actually read all of the messages. And I made this thread that was basically saying that the way this server is moderated, the way this thread got moderated, it basically hurt people of color more than it actually helped them. And the reason is because although the first half of the thread existing, the half of his lifetime, was around people trying to like learn and grow and engaging with it in a very constructive way, the last half of it and another like data points of it was people coming in to ask very harmful questions, to divert the conversation so that they could how do I want to say this? They were being assholes, but what they were truly doing was they're trying to illegitimize the idea that talking about this is helpful. That they were trying to say that when you talk about these things, you're hurting the community.
Right.
And I had no support from the moderators. So I decided to go to Twitter and say, here are the screenshots. Here's my work. And I want to put this out into the world.
Yeah. Okay. So interesting, right? And I think so reading through your thread, you were saying about like 80% of the conversations were pretty good, right? You know, people were asking genuine questions, or BIPOC were just kind of like saying their stuff. And it's mostly good, right? And that's kind of my experience as well. Like, I mean, I get comments on my YouTube comments, and I'll back and forth, and either people are kind of getting it, but they are filling in knowledge, or they'll be at a more kind of one-on-one level. It's like, okay, this is what I mean, this is what I mean. Mostly good, but there is an element, right? And that's kind of what I really wanted to focus on with you today. I, I don't ever want to like tell like, okay, this community is screwed, or there's so many bad things. Like, most people are good and they want to know, but there is an element. I don't even want, I like to call them hierarchy enforcers, right?
Okay.
They like what you're describing, right? Is like when they see like a racial category, like a BIPOC or BIMPOC or whatever it is, or they see racial stuff being like surfaced, they make the association that we're trying to harm something, take something away, shame them, blame them, and what we're really doing is we're criticizing white supremacy. We're criticizing, okay, why is the front facing paladin always have to be a white guy?
Mm-hmm.
Why are these adventures central? Why is Loth an evil queen who is like a black lady who's like sexualized? Why? I think I just saw this thing in Kotaku about like an AI from Ubisoft, and like they make her, and like she's like supposed to be like just a generated computer woman, but she's like, come hither, sexualized, kind of poses and gazes, and it's like I thought I was playing games. I didn't know I was going to get invited into a bedroom. And it's like it's just on and on and on and on like that. So we're trying to say this stuff, but then there's a group, and I don't know your experience with this group, that for whatever reason they just feel threatened by that conversation, just as that, and the ultimate function is to reinforce current hierarchies. So
Yeah.
is that a proper way to read what emerged for you?
I would say 100%. And I think it goes to like the ill-defined definition of racism that we talked about right at the top of this.
Right.
A lot of people felt that by having a thread called deconstruction of racist tropes in Dungeons and Dragons, they felt that what I was doing was I was calling them racist. And when I'm talking about deconstructing racism, what I'm talking about is a system. I'm talking about the text that is in front of us and the harm that it can perpetuate within the system of oppressions of racism that we live in today. That's very complex.
Yeah,
so
I was just gonna say that sounds very academic.
Yeah, and like I have to lean on the academia here, because I get very emotional about it, and this is one coping mechanism to kind of help deconstruct my own thoughts, because I'm talking to you, I'm being very professional, but I'm talking to you, and I have a knot of emotions in my heart. Like, I just want to just scream and scream and scream, but I live in a system as well. So as I deconstruct the system, I still have to live inside of it. So I can't scream and scream and scream, because if I scream and scream and scream, I go to jail. Or I get, complaints, I get the police involved, and I don't want that, because that could be very harmful to me. But what I mean to say is that I was very specific about academic about it, but not everyone has that level of background when it comes to these conversations. So when I say deconstruction of racism, what I think a lot of people hear is Steve is calling your hobby and your love racist.
Right.
And if you love it, therefore you are a capital R bigoted racist.
Right.
Which is not what I'm saying, but I completely understand if that's how you feel, because we just don't have the tools around this. If you get served a chicken steak, and that's all you know about steak, or chicken fried steak for all your life, and that's what you know about steak, then of course that's steak for you. But steak, the idea of like meat grilled and whatnot, that's a very complex thing to talk about. And if you don't have that experience, if you don't have those people introducing you to these concepts and caring for you and loving you and being compassionate as you go through these motions and experience these experiences, it's really hard to engage with these threads.
Mm-hmm.
However,
right. And I'm so glad you said that. Like, you mean the whole CRT thing that's happening? It's like, America has racist roots, 1619, and, Asian Exclusion Act. And, I just read about the Alamo, the anti-Mexican racism and Latino racism. Like, racism is kind of soaked in America. And I don't think that's like the historical reality, right? I mean, just if you consider racism as like, the denial of resources and the screwing with marginalized people, that's it. Then we say America has these racist roots. People like America. And so because we're criticizing something they love and something they're in, we think they think they're criticizing, they take it personal. They take it way personal. And that's where you get all the heat from. And that's because whenever we talk about racism, we're like in that former framework, the people that are like reacting, they think of racism as an intent thing, like a racism is something you do and you mean it. And it's like, no, we're not. Like all sorts of racist things happen, and we judge the racism by the impact. It's like anytime, and I make a big deal of this. Like, I mean, if I call something a racist, that's an invitation. Please stop doing this racist thing. Please stop doing this racist thing. Please stop, having your power fantasies where you're colonizing people. Please stop doing sexist things, transphobic things. It's an invitation. Like, and your thing was an invitation.
Yeah.
Right. It was, let's talk about this. These are actions. These are behaviors. These are things that have impact. Let's deconstruct this and talk about this. And it's unfortunately through the field of people who are very comfortable in their own space, it becomes interpreted as, well, we're calling this is your intent. You are intentionally racist. You're racist either because you're that, or you're racist by association because you love America, or because you love the second edition Dungeons and Dragons book. With the white paladin, if I say that the second edition, that has racist stuff and it has sexist stuff, it had plenty of sexist stuff in it, too, believe me, like they feel like we're calling them guilty by association.
Yeah.
And it's like, it doesn't have to go that way. And that's part of why I want to have this conversation. It's like, we're not doing that. This is an invitation to just deconstruct the thing and maybe even get a better thing out of it. We'll go to that, kind of in a little bit. I do want to pause. I feel like we're at a very high intellectual level, like just to plug in with the emotions. Like, I mean, I can tell you're getting very emotional as we're talking.
I am. Yes. Thank you for recognizing that.
Yeah. I mean, this is a safe space, man. I'm a psychotherapist, man. I'm all into the emotional aspect of things. So like, I mean, do we need to open up space to kind of talk about some of the emotional and the personal here, just to cleanse that out a little bit?
For this particular one, I'm good. I have my other networks and whatnot, like the networks that support me and things like that. So I'm like thumbs up through it. But if you want to get into more of kind of like the trauma that someone like me would experience in the Dungeons and Dragons space, I'm happy to do that with you.
Let's do it.
Yeah,
I think that I really want to get it to understand, because if we stay at the high intellectual stuff, I think people get the idea that we want to have intellectual debates about it, and that's not. It's necessary, but that is not sufficient to really get through this. Like, there is definitely trauma that has happened. There's exclusion.
Yeah.
There is judgment. There is there's the thing that happens, and then there's the wider community tolerance and acceptance of that thing. And in a way, that wider community tolerance and acceptance can be even more traumatizing.
I completely agree. So let's start here. You actually mentioned Paladin very early on.
Sure.
And I actually want to circle back to that. And I'm going to connect that with my experience, because my first Dungeons and Dragons character, like when I was a kid in high school, my first Dungeons and Dragons character was Warwick Laverman. He was described by me, a human being, I would say these words, a white Aryan man, blonde hair, blue eyes. And the reason is because if you're going to be a paladin, I was like, that's what a paladin is. It's a white dude. And I always describe the shining armor. I describe the swords. And I was racist as fuck. I would kill goblins on sight. I'd be like, what filth. By birth, you are a scourge on this land. And like, I'm picking my words very specifically here, because these are the words Dungeons and Dragons players use. At least that's what I use, and I was a Dungeons and Dragons player. And it was only when I was like an adult that I really realized that I'm repeating things that I'd seen in like other movies. I'm repeating things that I've seen in texts. And it wasn't making me happy. What it really was it allowing me to tap into things I had seen before. And I was seeking catharsis in a way that just wasn't really paying off. And I just kept coming to that well. I was like, maybe if I was more white, if I was more colonialist in my fantasy, maybe I would get more joy out of the game. And truly, when I got more joy out of the game was when I started telling stories that were my own. I started telling stories about being Asian, or when I just flat out told stories about like being bi, or just like fucking being horny. Like it can be as simple as that, right? And then you do it, and all of a sudden the game feels a whole lot different. And like it's like a turning point. So when it comes to the nitty gritty of like the trauma of being a person of color playing Dungeons and Dragons, I hope people understand that for me, when I was a kid in high school and playing Dungeons and Dragons, it felt most comfortable for me to put on the persona of being white, because that felt natural. That felt like it fit. And that's pretty horrific if you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard to explain to people who are already white. It's like, that's not so bad about being white. You know, we're all just people, and it's the book and it's fiction and all kind of stuff. And you talk about killing goblins, it's just fictional goblins. You know, I don't, just because I want to kill a bunch of goblins doesn't mean I hate people. It's like, we have the experience of being hated for who we are. We have the experience of being hated for the color of our skin, for our, our birth and all that kind of stuff. And even if we don't have direct experiences in our families, it's in, there's generational stories about this stuff. I bet any of us can go back a couple of generations and, read about people coming into a new world and being, treated a certain way. And it has a really, it's changed, obviously. I'm not afraid to go out, but at the same time, there's certain places where if I open my mouth in a certain way that I still get that flinch. It's like, oh, I'm not going to say that there.
Yeah.
Like that. I can't say that there. Like it takes a lot for me to kind of have these conversations. And, I think people think when I call out a game, or when I do a cultural criticism, or, post to something, that I like get something out of it. Like, I want to do this, and I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
I have to say no. Whatever I'm feeling, there's millions of people out there that are feeling the same level of exclusion, because, it's nothing wrong being a white person, but don't force me to be a white person. It's not me. It's not my family. It's not my, there's nothing wrong with it. That's for you. It's not me. And that's what you're saying, right?
It is. Yeah. I think about this a lot, where it's kind of like, if you invite me onto like an actual play for charity and things like that, and I'm at a table who's majority white people, I'm going to play a character that like, I think will mesh very well with the group and things like that. And it's going to come off in this like very specific way. Now, if I know these white folks and like I trust them, and that has happened quite a few times, I'm going to play an Asian guy or like an Asian gal and just like do my own thing. But if I don't really know folks, I have to be really careful, because the community, the Dungeons and Dragons itself, WotC itself, has really reinforced. Yeah, I think Dungeons and Dragons has done a lot to help progress this conversation. And I think if I was born 30 years ago, this conversation would look a lot different. But because we are where we're at, and, I can have these conversations, and I can bring up and help support like the Asians Represent Discord server. And I can actually create a thread all about deconstructing racism in a video game, or not a video game, sorry, tabletop RPG. I think that's really beautiful in a way. And I really wish that just the moderation was there to help the conversation flourish and begin going more than surface level.
Right. So let's talk about progress. I mentioned progress, and you talk about progress. Like, I think there's going to be an idea that like, we've made this progress. Why are we continuing to seem traumatized and hurt? And why are we always talk about this stuff? Okay, we have made progress. That is correct. This is not the same conversation. I could not have this conversation at Gary Gygax's table. That is not a conversation I could have. So thankfully for that. However, what the story of your thread was, is that whenever we quote unquote get too loud, whenever we push a little too far, pushback, we expect pushback. right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, and so there's pushback. Like someone will say something that is judgmental, that is ignorant, that is not what we said. And they're reacting to their own projection. They're not reacting to what we're saying. Like you're saying before, they're reacting to, Steve putting up a BIPOC thing as like we're calling them racist. And so there's that. And what I was saying before was like, it's there's the pushback. So that sucks. It's still there. It's still deep. We still got to figure out how to deal with it. And then there's this larger kind of permission structure that legitimates what they're saying. Well, they have free speech. Let them talk. They got free speech. Or, well, they're tired of being stigmatized. I just read this thing about like young conservatives are, they're becoming harder because they're getting fired at more by lefty, whatever. And I'm like, really? If that's all it takes is for us to kind of say stuff louder, for them to be radicalized, really? Are they listening to what we're saying? And so it's like, so there's two levels of it. There's the initial thing of the person that says something, but then there's a larger permission structure that legitimates, allows it to be said, allows the misinterpretation to kind of get baked in. And it's just like it just puts us on a defensive. And I think that's what you're getting at with the moderation, like the moderation or lack thereof, or poor moderation or moderation that doesn't understand what's going on is part of that permission structure.
Yes. When it comes to the community and like the overall intent, the core values, one would say, of a community, your moderation enforces it and speaks to it. And they should be doing that daily. It never stops. And that's what it means to moderate. It means to reinforce your core values. Now, when it comes to the D&D official Discord, their core values are quite clearly laid out. It's be civil, don't promote piracy. There are like 8 other ones, and like, okay, right, cool.
Right.
But that means that if someone comes in, it says very politely, I would love to enslave people. Or I would love to sexually assault this one race, and my players dig that. As long as they say it civilly, you can't really say anything about it. So what I have to do is I have to go and I pour myself an adult beverage, and I get on my keyboard and I say, if I have the energy, I say, hey, that's pretty messed up. Here's why I think it's messed up. Here's 400 words. That's messed up. So I put in 10x the work. Mm-hmm. And what they say back to me is that, blah, 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 they're probably giving me 20 words in response. And then I'm at a junction here. Like, do I give another 400 words because they've clearly misinterpreted something here? They're clearly baiting me into something. With good moderation, we could actually say, hey, there's something going on here. Something's happening. Mm-hmm. We're going to make sure that this is like an even playing field. I speak to this in the terms of like podcasting and interviews, where generally there's a moderator. And the reason for that is because you want to make sure everyone's voice is equally heard and that everyone's voice is weighted properly. When I give you 400 words to your 20 words, then the effort is not weighted properly. And, there's like the audience is watching here and they're watching the moderation do nothing. Mm-hmm. And what they're seeing here is that I could also give 400 words to Steve's response, but it'd be a lot easier. 20 words. And that's harmful, because if you go back, if you rewind this cast like 20 minutes ago, even my definition of racism took more than 20 words, and that was just over voice. And that was with someone I trust. If it's a stranger, I'm going to need a lot more space to do that. And I need someone to have my back for that. Because if they don't, what I'm probably going to do is piece the hell out, because I do not have time for this and I'm not getting paid for it, which is really sad, because I want to be there. I want the moderation on my back so that we're giving a tit for tat. We're having conversation. We're giving equal energy and effort into this, because that's how we're going to find some kind of common ground so that we can build our foundation, so that we can build that groundwork, so that we can begin progressing through these thoughts.
So here's the pushback, right? And this is where things get exhausting. So let's say on our forum, Board Game Geek and Board Gaming, the moderation has gotten very active. in the last couple of years. They're really, cutting down on racism, sexism, homophobia. They're really they're pro diversity. They've made that conscious change, and a couple of places have made that conscious change as well. So then the pushback is, well, they're banning conservative views.
Okay.
Well, they're banning, they ban me because they don't like what I'm saying. They ban me because they don't like who I am. They ban me because, they can't tolerate, they can't tolerate disagreement, and they want to live in an echo chamber like that. And so WotC, like a bigger company, hears that, right? And a bigger company says, well, I don't want to ban people for their views. So there's a tolerance of the quote unquote conservative views. And I want to be clear. I mean, I don't have no problem with conservative views. Like I got people who I'm a doctor. Like my day job is a doctor. I have to deal with people. It doesn't matter who they are. So I'm used to dealing with people from all over the spectrum. The problem is conservative views become this idea of let's enslave people, let's colonize people, let's do this thing, and all this stuff is okay. Like, okay, that becomes conservative, quote unquote, conservative views. And when that gets moderated, addressed, edited, whatever it is, then that is called, well, they're banning me because of my beliefs. And unfortunately, WotC is, I think, caught there because I think they on some level buy that like we don't want to ban people for their quote unquote conservative views. Is that a decent reading of it?
I think so, yeah. Like, we want to keep D&D as accessible as possible, says the community managers, right? Like that is their goal. We want it to be accessible, and we want people to be able to come into the community because WotC is a business and they want dollars. And like, I get that. That's 100% valid, and I'm not going to criticize that.
Sure.
That said, you want to accommodate these conservative views, and you also want to promote these other views that are more progressive, where we want to be critical of these kind of things. And you're going to lose. There's no way to win that, because on one hand, you have people who are saying things like, I love the fantasy of enslaving people. And on the other hand, you have people who are like, that's really messed up. And it's like, you're going to try to play the middle ground here, because that middle ground is looking pretty dicey to me. Now, I don't think necessarily that we should ban people who say that kind of stuff, because earlier on, I was talking about this as a system of oppression. And when I say system of oppression, I just don't mean like people of color. Like, I mean, white folks, y'all are in like a racist like system as well. Like, you have to understand that. So the idea that would bring you joy to colonize a Southeast inspired setting and like tell those stories, that's worth deconstructing. Like, that's worth talking about. Do I think WotC has the ability to talk about it individual with each individual person? No. But do I think moderators have the ability to step in and say, hey, pause button, that's a lot to unpack. Let's like put a 60-second timer on this channel and let people just kind of say what they need to say about this. Yes, that is a real thing you can do literally right this second. But we're not there. And I think that is a huge gap, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, like moderation doesn't necessarily have to be banning. It doesn't have to be like, deleting the comment or whatever it is. Like I've seen moderators in other places, they'll jump in and they'll say, okay, we got to remember the community rules. Or they'll do the thing like, okay, you can only post once every 5 minutes. Or there's a whole bunch of other stuff that there are tools in the chest. Unfortunately, it sounds like, and this is what I wanted to kind of check this with you. It sounds like the mods they're not looking for that. They're looking for just like a totally aggressive speech, and they're looking for, just like obvious stuff, right? And that they're there to kind of remove the obvious stuff, which thank God. the totally. Would be a complete fire dump if we didn't do any, if it was just like a free for all. But there is this sphere of kind of like cultural stuff and gender stuff that it's in a culture war right now. So there's like the lines are very blurry, at least on the moderator. And for us, they're not very blurry. Like there's some things that are just like stupid and don't do it. And we can, we're not going to ban people. we're trying to create conditions we can all get along, like, including white folks, black folks, Asian folks, Native American folks, Arab folks, everybody. Like, we want to have a multicultural vision, but I think that I don't know, like, I mean, you in your thread that you had mentioned that like some education is lacking,
Yeah.
on the part of moderation and on the part of, I mean, are we like, what is, I mean, can you put your finger on what a mod can do better? Like, does it come down to the fact that mods have to choose? And if the mod doesn't choose, then they're choosing. Does it come down to that? Like, in terms of that, educating about that piece?
So the education is key. But in a business standpoint, I'm not going to use the word education because that is typically like too nebulous.
Okay.
I call this onboarding. Like, you need standard operating procedures, you need goals, and you need like core values. You need these business oriented things if you're going to hire another business to moderate your place, right? So if we want to talk specifically about business, when you hire a service like Mod Squad, you absolutely need to give them very strict, these are our core values, whether it's 4, 8, 12, whatever it is. You need to give them those. You need to give them standard operating procedures. You need to show them examples and onboard them about what happens when someone's like, I want to enslave goblins and I want to breed them forcefully, and this is the story I want to tell. You need to tell them like how to actually engage with that. You need to tell them that when someone talks about the perception of assault of your trans woman DM as a cis woman, and you feel like they're assaulting you because they showed interest in you romantically and you didn't accept it and they turned your group against you. I use quotes there. You need the onboarding and resources and the support to engage with that in such a way that you can say, pause. We need to adhere to our goals and our values. And if that's resonating, if that's kind of like saying, oh, yeah, there needs to be like direction. The ship has to go in a single direction. I wrote a blog post on this, and it's about having a mission statement. Mm-hmm. If you're going to have a space like this, you absolutely need a mission statement that says, this is what we're always going to try to do. Every single message that goes through our Discord, that goes through our channels, it has to push towards that mission statement. It doesn't have to be 100% aligned. It can be like little off course, and that can be healthy. But we need a mission statement that is transparent so that people know that when they engage with this and we say that, hey, this is out of scope, this is off topic, this is inappropriate, any of those words, it is clear to the individual person. And if that individual person is like, well, that's ridiculous and I don't want to engage with that, then you can easily say, here's the door. Thank you for your time.
Right. I mean, or they're going to say that you're excluding me from my views, and they make it kind of like a pro free speech thing. There's all sorts of strategies that are be done. I did have a thought though, as you were speaking. So we're talking about communities, right? But there's a level of like, just the source material itself. And the reckoning that's happened the last couple of years that the source material itself has some racist stuff going on, has bioessentialism, has tropes that are not positive in terms of like the evil races and that kind of thing, or so that's still in the source material. So in a way, like, we're having all these conversations, but like 5e came out, I don't know, 2014, 15,
Sure.
somewhere around there. And so like the racial reckoning didn't happen until 2020. So like we're still, in a way, we're still there. And I remember they came out with that Tasha's Cauldron of Everything supplement that's like, and there's like, okay, this is a way to rebuild your character, but they didn't give any guidance. They just, okay, no more racial stat modifiers, just put any stat modifiers on any class of race that you want. And it's like, okay, but like without guidance, then the old stuff, that people are just going to reproduce the old stuff. So then I don't know if it's possible to do what you're saying about like reforming the communities without really going back and redressing the source material itself.
Yeah.
Is that, I mean, am I being too pessimistic about that?
I mean, let's look at the roots. So the history defines our present, right? the game is built on colonialist ideas. And I don't think that it's too far of a stretch to say that. We are talking about adventurers who are given, a place to stay. This is your home base. And you're going to go into a dungeon and you're going to take money from them. You're going to take gold from them, take their stuff, and you're going to kill them. And then when you're done and your resources are depleted, you go back home and you'll do it again. And like, that's a colonial storyline. Like, I don't think that's necessarily like a controversial statement to make. I feel like that's the definition of colonialism. That said, D&D has moved away from it. It absolutely has tried to like bring in more stories into it, but we bolted them on. Like, we never really examined where these mechanics came from. So the mechanics of like, experience in leveling up, like, there's still the spore of colonialism in there. And within that spore of colonialism, of course, we have the tendrils, we have the mycelium of racism and sexism and queerphobia and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's good that we're beginning to move away from it. But at some point in time, as you pull and you tug and you bring yourself closer to kind of like the core themes, at some point in time, you're going to come to that core theme of colonialism. And it doesn't go any deeper than that. You just kind of have to look it in the face and decide, now what are you going to do? Right. And that's tough. That's tough for a lot of people. Tough for me, to be honest.
Yeah. And I think you're really touching on it. Like, how do I gain XP in D&D? In most systems and most tables, you gain XP by killing. Yeah. How do I gain power? I gain power by taking.
Yeah.
Like, period, point blank. And it's like, we can mess around with the stuff and tell different stories with it, but at the end of the day, why do people come to D&D? And I think that's where people, like, in terms of white folks who feel so aggrieved, that's where they feel so threatened. Like, we're really against the core of it now. Like, what we're saying is like the very reason that you're coming to kill and take stuff and get your yayas out in that power fantasy type way, like, we're the two of us and whoever's a critic here, we're attacking that very thing that you come to the table for, a white person. And so that's where people feel really like, no, don't take that away from me.
Yeah.
What are you going to leave me with? You're not going to leave me with any fun whatsoever. My life sucks. Like, gamers, like, it's funny, like, we're talking about kind of white supremacy. Like, a lot of gamers, they don't experience themselves as part of the white supremacy. They experience themselves as the geeks and the freaks that are like, they're excluded themselves. So it's like, I've heard that comment many times where I'm excluded if I'm a white person, like, and like a geek white person, I'm excluded from my main group. I'm excluded from my family. I'm excluded from all these people. And then I come into D&D to be accepted for who I am. And I was until about 2019. And now when I open my mouth, I'm told that I'm a racist because I like to kill stuff. I like to kill things and take their stuff. So now this is not a safe space for me anymore. So when DM Steve makes his thread about racism stuff and inclusion, everything, like, you're taking the safe space that I have, the one safe space maybe, and you're making it like unsafe for me because you're taking something away that is my fun. One of the only things I have to have fun. So I think that's a part of what really animates that intense dragon breath pushback.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's tragic because I being like someone who grew up mask, I'm just like, I get that because I love my pulpy fiction. Like, y'all, I love putting on a Bruce Lee movie and Bruce Lee just punches the shit out of a bunch of Japanese folks, and that's problematic as hell.
Oh, it's bad. It's bad. It's a Chinese power trip. Power fantasy. Yeah.
But I have grown up to understand what was going on contextually during that time, and I understand the context of that film, so I can both understand how fun it is to watch Bruce Lee fucking just like knee someone in the face and then put a katana through their back. That's great. But I can also understand that this is coming out of like a place of supreme pain and oppression. So when Bruce Lee kicks the sign that says no Chinese or dogs allowed, that's the moment that stands out for me, not the moment of stabbing that teacher in the back with his own katana. And my hope was that a thread like deconstructing racism in Dungeons and Dragons might give people similar opportunities to leverage themselves to have those conversations internally, to begin to deconstruct. I use that word so specifically, deconstruct what they were thinking already, and just think about it. I never thought my thread would ever turn a bigot into a not bigot. That was outside the scope of a Discord thread because that's ridiculous. My hope was that someone who was just kind of like on the precipice here could read this and have a conversation and maybe just engage a little bit and just think to themselves, because truly the way we're going to make change is on the individual level and just talking to them. Sorry, no, that's false. Two things. One, individual level and like talk to them and like get that motion. Two, laws. We should fix our laws, but that's outside the scope of this podcast. I think can't change laws here.
Yeah, I mean, or like change norms.
Yeah,
right?
Precedents and things like that. Yeah.
Norms, precedents, biases, prior understandings. Like as scary as it can be to some people that we're questioning the very roots of what is fun for them. And we're saying, okay, killing and taking stuff is colonialist. And therefore, if you're, doing this, then you're colonialist and you're bad, you're racist. Like that's you made that leap. like the act itself is colonialist of killing to take their stuff. Like that, we're not saying that the person is like a colonialist and they love it. As like, what we're saying is, okay, this is the core of D&D, that it does cause some problems. Is there another way that we can do this? Are there like other stories? Not that we can't tell them. Like I always say, if you want to be your white supremacist power trip, go like that. I'm not going to say that you can't do it. Just I don't want it to be in the center of a Discord. I don't want it to be like I don't want to have it front facing whenever I log on to these things. And that's that. The center needs to be multicultural. The center needs to be and if that means that certain ideas or certain behaviors are getting excluded, it's like, well, there's things to replace it. And if you don't like those things that are replacing it, then I don't know what to say, but it's not like we're just taking it away, leaving you with nothing. Like there's plenty of other stories to be told. There's plenty of other ways to go about this. And that's what we're trying to articulate.
Yeah. So what I'll add on to that is that I actually think there is no place for a white supremacist narrative. And the reason is because I think whiteness deserves to be deconstructed. And in my academic studies and all this work that I put into it, I've come to realize that whiteness is a lie. It is fictional. It is fluid. And it will always take the form to hurt you, even if you're white. This is where the term conditional whiteness comes from. If you are Irish, for example, your whiteness was conditional.
Right.
When it came to how you were treated via the law and the impact that it had on your family and the impact that it had on your entire community. And we could talk about this when it comes to being Christian or Catholic or all these other identifiers. If you want to even talk about it when it comes to being Midwest US, yes, your whiteness, in my opinion, can be weaponized against you. When it comes down to it, there is always the question of but how white are you? And that's always the question that will always be in the back pocket of white supremacy. White supremacy will always hold that back. White supremacy thrives on the idea that whiteness can always be mutable and that you can at any point in time be discarded. And that is why I think white supremacist narratives have no place in any of our media. I do think that your Midwestern story, I think your Kids on Bike story, I think your Stephen King story, I think that has a place. And I support it. 100% I support it. Yeah. I think your Stand By Me story, where you are discovering the violence that can happen in middle America, I think that has a place. I think if you are a German immigrant to America, I think your story has a place, but it is not within white supremacy. That is a sacrifice you make on the altar to white supremacy. And at the end of the day, it will take everything from you. And I've seen it and it's sad. It's tragic.
It's a really hopeful place to end. And so, and in terms of like education, that fuzzy word, right?
Yeah.
And growth and how to become like better moderators, better allies, or realizing your values. Like I say this a couple of times in my episode, like whiteness kind of bores me. Like I don't want to hear your whiteness story. I want to hear your Northwest story. I want to hear your Irish story. I want to hear your, I want to like, get into locality, right? I'm a big person in locality, your land and your culture. Like, culture doesn't emerge from these racial categories. Even like a word like Latino, right? Latino,
Yeah.
there's no such thing as a Latino. It's all like we're bound together because, it basically defined against whiteness. Right. We're
Yeah.
only Latino because we had to be in order to find a place or whatever. But like, really, I don't want to identify as that. I want to identify as Puerto Rican. I want to identify as Taino. I want to identify as these land-based things. So it's worth it for people. It's worth it for WotC. It's worth it for, the Mod Squad. It's worth it for people who are running Discords. Even if you don't have the academic background, right? Even if you don't have the tools and the particular vocabulary, I think is a ground level idea that colonization, cleavage, white centrality, your C's right there, like, colonization, cleavage, white centrality, and like, other things that are associated with that, like those don't need to be the default ways of telling stories. And if you can, if those entities can kind of find a way to make that a part of their values and part of their moderation and like the inclusion of other types of stories, and maybe that requires like another edition. Maybe it requires a 5.5 where we really mess with the stats and mess with the initial adventures and bake like new things into the narrative. I'm not sure what that would take, but at least we can. That's the kind of conversations that I'd be really interested in.
Yeah. I mean, like, we're not hired for this. Like, this is not our job. Like, we are passionate about it. We can talk to it. But at the end of the day, we're not decision makers. So it's not our call. But fuck. Sorry. Family friendly. It was so good
we're
to hear
way
you
past
say
that. We're good.
so good to hear you say that, because sometimes it just takes, other voice to speak up and say, here I am, and I want to talk more. I'm tired of being silent.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And what I have to say is, and that doesn't have to be threatening people. I don't take anybody's fun away. Games are awesome. Role playing is awesome. My man is in a room full of cosplay and full of posters and full of all the, like, this man thinks gaming is awesome. Why would he want to take that away from people?
Yeah.
We're not taking that from any people. I don't care what color you are, even if you're from the Midwest or from, a place where, where there isn't a lot of like diversity of color or anything like that. Like, we don't want to take gaming away from you. So please stop assuming that we are when we say these things. I know it sounds a little bit like a pie in the sky whenever I say that, but we can't quit.
Won't quit.
Can't quit. So,
yeah.
All right. So anything else? Is anything when I contacted you, I know, you had some stuff prepared and everything. Is there anything else aspect conversation that you wanted to foreground before we closed?
I think we focused on like a lot of the things I want to talk about. I mean, at this point here, I'm just going to plug, and I'm going to plug, when it comes to tabletop RPGs, Dungeons and Dragons is like the king, the queen, just like, there it is. You can enjoy it. And like, I don't fault you for that, because I have a lot of fun Dungeons and Dragons. I have a weekly game for Dungeons and Dragons and we play, and like, it's great. But if you're looking for ways to expand your horizons, you don't have to play them, but maybe pick up like Unbreakable, which is an anthology of just Asian creators. Maybe pick up Uncaged. Uncaged is an anthology. I think they're on they just finished volume 4. I think volume 5 got released. I don't know if that was just me giving insider knowledge or not, but Uncaged is an anthology all about marginalized genders. So give that a look as well. And if you want to look at indigenous stories, take a look at Coyote and Crow. Take a look at all these things that are being created and just absorb media. Like, if you have time to go and like watch the new adventures, like, sure, Doctor Strange is great. But if you want to go and just like really blow your mind, go and check out Marhalika, which is a game about playing a mech pilot, and your mech, it's Southeast Asian inspired. Your mech has like a divine spirit inside of it, and you have to be able to cage that spirit from the earth, which is divine. And if you don't do that enough, if you don't return to the earth enough, then the spirit can become unshackled, and maybe they become the pilot and you become the AI.
Mm.
So like, damn, that's really, really like fucking sorry. Really, really important. Speaking of Latino, Nahua came out recently. I don't know if you were familiar with it, Jason.
No.
Nahua is a Mexican RPG about playing as Mexican cartel dealers, but you don't find drugs. You hunt angels and you kill them, and you take their parts and you sell those on the black market. So I'm like, that's a really intense story spoken from a very specific kind of trauma.
Yep.
So all that to say, Dungeons and Dragons, I love it, but there's so much more out there to just enjoy and appreciate, and it will expand your horizons. You can have these conversations in a much deeper, rich level, and I think you can enjoy it.
Fantastic. All right. DM Steve, go ahead and subscribe to Asians Represent. Go ahead and check this man out on Twitter, where he puts a lot. Any other social medias that we should keep an eye on for you?
No, that's it. I had an Instagram where I did a lot of cosplays, but hey, we were in a pandemic and I just stopped cosplaying for 2 years. So follow me on Twitter.
The game, the cosplay game needs to get itself ramped back up now that we're everything's
absolutely
okay. Yeah. All right, my man. Thank you so much for your vulnerability, for your intelligence, and for keeping it real. Thank you very much for stopping by the show.
All my love and my respect.
If you can change your mind, you can change the world, people. So until next time, later, everybody.